Hello YouTube, and congratulations to everyone in Italy for voting against the globalist tyranny. Congratulations on your no vote. I'm sure a lot of people there are very happy to see that this referendum to consolidate power into the federal bloc there has failed. And so that's good, and I think everyone there probably is happy and very proud of that outcome. But I wanted to touch on one thing, actually a couple things I'm going to touch on in this video, but the first one is that one of my favorite YouTubers brought something up this morning, an idea that I want to pass along and kind of reiterate in order to sort of accelerate the spread of this information and this idea. And that is the person to be most afraid of in any situation, is the person with nothing left to lose, right? The person with nothing left to lose is the one who's going to act the most desperately and in the most extreme kind of fashion in order to sort of maintain their status quo. And so that's the situation that is quickly developing here with the globalists. Worldwide, they are being shut down and their plans are being foiled. And the populist movement worldwide is towards an anti-globalist, more individualist sort of ideology and the kind of policies that go along with that ideology. And so as the globalists lose more power, they will become more and more desperate, and they will become more and more like the person who has nothing left to lose. And so it's probably very important that everyone considers that and understands that the situation will actually most likely get more drastic for groups of people than it will get better. Right? It's going to get worse before it gets better, is what I'm trying to say. And so that's definitely something to consider and something to think about, and I think people here in America should really consider that a lot. Because the other point that I'd like to bring up is that in Western cultures like ours here in the United States, there has been a concerted effort that's been ongoing for the better part of a half a century or maybe 3/4 of a century. And it's an effort led by Marxists and leftists to undermine the success of laissez-faire systems. And I'm very aware that what we have in the United States here is not actual capitalism, right? At best, it's crony capitalism. Really, it's an oligarchy. It's a corporatism. It is not laissez-faire. But what the leftists have been trying to do is to undermine the remnants of that laissez-faire in order to sort of prop up their own ideology. And this sort of comes out of the 60s and 70s when it was very well demonstrated that all of these modern socialist, communist, Marxist attempts were failing miserably, and it was pretty well demonstrated all of the logical flaws within the Marxist ideology and how it was sort of based on some false premises and all that. And most people are pretty familiar with this. But it's maybe just some of the younger generations who have been fed too much of the Kool-Aid. Because what you have here in the United States is a country that really is no longer united. There are two cultures here in the United States, and it's the left and the right. Sadly, it's a false dichotomy. Again, something that's been perpetrated by Marxists is driving this wedge between people in order to get them to believe that there's a fundamental difference between individualism and collectivism, when in reality they're part of the same whole, and the two concepts and the behaviors that go along with both of those ideologies need to be balanced in any healthy society. And it ties into tribalism and all this sort of other misunderstanding that communists and Marxists and leftists kind of have about ancient people were very collectivists and they didn't believe in individualism, and there was no such thing as laissez-faire. Actually, all that's totally incorrect. If you do any real studying into anthropology, you'll find out that tribalism is different from collectivism, right? And so, I'll just leave it at that. But what's happened here in the United States is a wedge has been driven, and it's separating the so-called left from the so-called right. And really, it's just sort of about brainwashing people. It's about creating new leftists. And that's sort of what the Marxists of the world have been focusing on in Western cultures, is trying to turn some of those people into leftists as opposed to people who believe in a representative republic. It's trying to convince people that pure democracy is somehow better, right? Because 51% of the people should have the right to subjugate the remaining 49%, or at least, that's what these leftists believe. And so, it's probably important to consider how all of that is going to play out in your communities. If you look at how the election sort of turned out here in the United States, you'll see that the majority of the country, from a land mass, land area perspective, voted for Donald Trump, whereas all of the Hillary Clinton support came from very highly populated urban centers. And I think that's a trend we're going to see accelerated here in the United States, is that the urban centers and the rural populations become further separated from one another, more alienation, more disdain between the two groups, and we're really witnessing the fracturing of the United States right now. It's definitely history in the making, and I don't think that even if Donald Trump turns out to be a great reformer rather than just a mild reformer or a half-assed reformer, even if he does the best job possible, I don't think that it's possible to stop this fracturing from happening here, and in other places, other countries in the world too. But this is where I'm from and sort of what I'm most familiar with. So you're going to see here in the United States that the wedge between the left and the right is going to get bigger and bigger, and the cognitive dissonance surrounding all these topics that these ideologies are based on is going to get worse. And that leads me to the third thing that I would like to talk about, which is the California House Resolution number 4, which is a great example of the cognitive dissonance that's going on. Here you have politicians that have been elected by their communities who are creating legislation based on cognitive dissonance, based on the fact that they believe that Donald Trump is going to try to deport all immigrants, when all you have to do is get onto Google. Even Google will still return this result, even though they'd like to censor as much of it as they could. All you have to do is get on Google and go type into the little doobly-doo, what did Donald Trump say about immigrants and deporting illegals and da-da-da-da-da, and you can watch the video where he specifically says, I want to deport felons, right? And I have no problem with this. I think if we have felons here who are not citizens, we should kick them out and send them back to the people who are responsible for them. It's enough of a burden, I think, for our community, our national community, to have to take care of the felons who are citizens, right? We don't need additional felons to burden the tax dollar, as it were. So I encourage you to look into this House Resolution number 4, just because it will help exemplify the cognitive dissonance that's going on, and how the nation is being divided, and the fact that actual facts and real data aren't going to matter anymore, especially as the global power structure, the globalists and the power elite do their best to censor independent media on the left and the right. It's not going to matter. People who are telling the truth, if it goes against the globalist agenda, they're going to be censored. And you see that the media right now, the legacy Mockingbird Media is pushing really, really hard to convince everyone that any independent news source is a Russian propaganda, or is fake news, or is paid trolls, paid Republican trolls, or something, some nonsense like that. And this is only going to get worse. And to that end, I would recommend that everyone begin to utilize as many of the social networking platforms as they can as a redundancy feature. So that is to say, don't just rely on YouTube and Facebook and the platforms that you currently use. If you're an independent reporter, if you're producing independent media, look for some of the more underground, less popular social network platforms, just as a redundancy feature, just as a place to sort of back up the information that you're trying to get out there. Because I think the censorship effort against the truth about globalism and sort of this power elite structure is going to take on a whole new direction as President Trump, is inaugurated and fills that role, and all these leftists crying for a communist revolution. Yeah, that's not a topic. We'll maybe another video. But the point is that the censorship effort is really probably going to get a big kick into high gear, and so I would recommend anyone producing independent media utilize as many platforms as you can. Back up your stuff. Save it off to physical storage devices so that you can just continue to upload it as it gets deleted or whatever, blocked, censored. But just take the steps necessary to make sure that you can continue to publish your information, and look for new venues to do that through, because the traditional outlets for that stuff, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, they're they have been infiltrated, and they have been censoring information to a small degree, and that's only going to get worse. Thanks for listening.